Welcome into the ABCFB podcast. My name is Andrew Garrison. I represent the A in the ABCFB acronym. That's Brooks, he's the B, and college football is the rest. That's what we're discussing on this podcast today and always. We have plenty to discuss today. We're still just kind of making up things to talk about until we hit the point where there's actually games to react to and preview. It's August 13th at the time of recording this right now today, September 5th, obviously. Week 1 at large, August 29th, which is creeping ever closer, the start of the season as a whole with week 0. We have quite a bit to talk about today. We're going to start by looking at the IU running back room, some new faces there, some familiar faces there. Plenty of thoughts from both of us on that. Then we're going to predict the Big Ten records and the standings across the board from top to bottom, talk about some of those big games and where those swing results are going to come. I think there's definitely some disagreements between Brooks and I, and definitely some maybe variation in what maybe you'd expect, because if there's so many games that are swing games that are potentially even, if one team wins a few of them, then their record could look a whole lot different than you'd anticipate. And then at the end, we'll do our playoff predictions and pick our top 12 teams and then go through all the games until we pick a national champion, which will be outrageous and ridiculous, and I look forward to looking back on that in 6 months. But for now, that's what we have to say about that in the national segment. We'll start with the IU running back room, because I know you, Brooks, have thoughts on this. I know this is a position group you've had your eye on, and I have some thoughts to kind of fill in at the end from fall camp these last couple of weeks. So IU, defending champions, reigning champions, this running back room, what do you have for us?
Well, I mean, I think all of the discussion right now circulating about Indiana and their offense is really doubt and worry around Josh Hoover. Obviously, we've already talked at length about Josh Hoover and the new role he's stepping into as the Indiana starting quarterback. But I think Indiana fans and even national fans in general should take a notice to this Indiana running back, because Indiana is bringing back a solid offensive line. You get back those starters and guys like Carter Smith, you have Bray Lynch, you have guys across the board where they were incredible down the stretch for Indiana last year. Now you have 3 great running backs in the running back room. Turbo Richard from Boston College, Lee Beebe Jr., who's coming back after that injury he suffered in the 3rd game of the year against Indiana State, and then obviously Kobe Martin. Now I have some stats here, but Turbo Richard rushed for 749 yards last year with 9 touchdowns for Boston College. He's going to come in. He might be that red zone back for Indiana. He could be the do-it-all guy, really, for the Hoosiers. Lee Beebe Jr., what little we saw from him, only 27 carries last year, but 207 yards, 7.7 yards per carry for Beebe Jr., and his injury, it was felt, but also forced this guy I'm about to talk about, Kobe Martin, to step up in a new role. 78 carries for Martin, 505 yards, 6 total touchdowns, and 6.5 yards per carry. Indiana's a rush-first offense, and having those 3 guys in the backfield is going to do great things for this offense. Mike Shanahan, he has all the tools in the world to use them to his advantage. And when you have guys like Nick Marsh, Charlie Becker, Davion Chandler, guys, all the Shaz Preston, I'm just thinking of all wide receivers here. You have all of the offensive guys in place to be successful. In Indiana, having these 3 running backs, I think, is really going to help them as a run-first offense.
Absolutely. We've seen those players excel in fall camp a little bit here as well. In the spring game, too, I think that's really where a lot of your initial thoughts on what you just said kind of stems from. I know at the spring game, that running back room was fantastic as well. Jerrion Campbell and Kyler Kropp, kind of deeper down the depth chart, were also, at least players that prompted me to write something down in my notes during the spring game. Obviously, they may not play much moving forward throughout the regular season and beyond. But great running back room. I think this group's going to be capable of producing not only in a similar amount to what we saw last season, but also in a similar way, just in the sense of them being able to, it's not just strength, it's not just speed, it's also a spry group, a nimble group, an agile group. I just wrote for the Hoosier Network, who we both cover this team for, some takeaways from fall camp week 2, and it's great that you happen to, you decided we should talk about the running backs, and it works out very well because I had my eye on the running backs a little bit this week. And those were three words that came to mind that maybe beyond just bulldozing for extra yards, like you mentioned with some of those do-it-all running backs who, obviously by nature can do it all, but punch it in at the goal line or on, fourth and short situations. It's not just that. That's what I loved about Kalon Black the most. I have a couple plays that are burned into my brain from the national championship game in particular, where Kalon Black is just, wriggling free for an extra 2 yards. It's an 8-yard gain instead of 6. And so sometimes it's elusiveness, sometimes it's slipperiness. And I think that this group is going to be able to do that as well. I describe them physically in a lot of ways, mainly with Richard, who I have my eye on the most just because he's a newer face. I'm not as familiar with his game. I describe them as like compact muscle cars where they can still, obviously punch it in like you mentioned, but also I feel like there's definitely some agility in that spryness. I'm not sure if spryness is the way to say that, but spry is an adjective that I've definitely used for these running backs. And I appreciate watching that a great deal in practice with the amount that we're able to see. And we obviously saw that in the spring game the most. So that will be fascinating to watch play out. I definitely think it will feel similar to the running back room last year, not just look similar on the box score, which is an appreciable amount of continuity for fans and the coaches, obviously, and the players as well, as Indiana looks to go back to back.
Well, also, all three of these guys averaged over 5 yards per carry. And when you get into a situation, obviously, first down, 10 yards, if you're running on first down, you get 5, 6, maybe 7 yards from a first down carry. It really opens up what Indiana is able to do with this offense. And, I've talked to a lot of other fellow Indiana beat reporters. They think Indiana should be at times a pass first offense because it could help open up the run. The whole saying, running opens up the pass. I genuinely think Indiana doesn't need to change a thing. If you have these running backs who get you around 6 yards per carry, it's 2 or 3 plays to get 4 or 5 yards. And Indiana has proven time and time again that they can do that. And I think what they bring back on the offensive line should only give you more confidence in these running backs, in Josh Hoover, in the offense as a whole, because having those guys from the offensive line who are obviously pushing that line of scrimmage forward, opening lanes for the running backs, and giving Hoover more time, Indiana's offense is going to be as efficient as ever.
Absolutely. Yeah, 4 of those expected starters on the offensive line are redshirt seniors. We've obviously got the one youth spot there in the tackle position. But between Carter Smith, Joe Bruner, who we just spoke to just a couple days ago here in fall camp, Bray Lynch, Drew Evans, all redshirt seniors. Tons of experience there, tons of proven production. Obviously, Bruner coming over from Wisconsin, and those other 3 elevating within the program, and then a lot of young guys behind that group. So Indiana's obviously, like every team, going to have to especially hope for no injury or any disaster in that way. And obviously that is something to look out for with every team. But certainly with this team, I think if this group, especially if it stays healthy up there at the top at the offensive line position, Indiana could definitely find a great deal of success, as you mentioned, in making it easy for a running back room that doesn't really need it to be made easy, right? Like we talked about how wriggling free and that elusiveness and that slipperiness and finding space in those ways. I think that's what these running backs could potentially be great at, just like last year, but they may not even need to. And so it's just like one of those extra characteristics that makes it completely unfair when you have the great offensive line and you have the great running back room. Combining those 2 position groups is a great thing. It's my favorite thing to look out for in teams before the season, is looking to find position groups that are great, that work in tandem with one another. Common sense would be quarterbacks and receivers. Even this is common sense, offensive line and running backs. That's my favorite thing to do. Find those 2 combinations in position groups that are great and see how you can potentially parlay that into exponentially expanded success. And I think that could be something that could exist here with Indiana's running back room, like you mentioned. If you have anything else to add, certainly add whatever you'd like. But we definitely have plenty to discuss moving forward throughout this episode. We can start with our Big Ten record and standings predictions. We'll go pretty quick because there's 18 teams, but we'll take a little bit more time towards the top. I'm sure you agree. We should go 1 through 18. We should start at the top. We could save our Big Ten championship pick for the end in terms of that actual matchup.
Yeah, I'm good to do it in whatever way.
Let's do it that way.
You're thinking.
You want to start with your number 1?
Yeah, number one, I am picking the Indiana Hoosiers, partially for reasons we just discussed. I think the offensive line, and also we talked about it last episode, but the defensive line, if you can control the line of scrimmage on both the offense and defensive side of the ball, you're going to be fine. Indiana has a great O-line, a great D-line, and great coordinators as well as Kurt Signetti. So I have all the faith in the world that Indiana is going to get it done. I have Indiana going 12-0, meaning they're beating Ohio State and they're beating USC, both in Memorial Stadium, but they're going 12-0 in the regular season.
I have Indiana at 12-0 and at number one as well. Obviously, then in the Big Ten championship game, we'll talk about that matchup a little bit later on. And yeah, you make some great points. And as I've always said, I mean, when I went and filled out my, check the boxes on all these wins, first thing I did was just pick all the Indiana games because I just keep saying that I'll never pick against them until they lose. So I've got to hold that up. I got to keep doing it. I did it here. Indiana's 12-0 for me. Maybe we can do this snake draft style. I have Ohio State at number 2. They're 10-2, but one loss in the conference. It's a loss to Indiana, and it's a loss to Texas. They're on the road against Texas. I'll take the home team in that situation. Two great teams, potentially two teams that could have a first-round bye by the time we get to the end of that point. We'll talk about our playoff predictions a little bit later on. Ohio State 10-2, but second in the conference and in the Big Ten championship game again with Indiana for me.
Yeah, I also have Ohio State at number 2. However, I have them going 11-1 overall. I think Ohio State is going to beat Texas. And I think for multiple reasons. I think Ohio State is still incredibly talented on the offensive side of the ball. And then defensively, while they lose guys like Sonny Styles, Arvell Reese, Caleb Downs, they're going to reload. And you have the advantage of having Matt Patricia. And it's not easy to go and win in Austin, but I think the Buckeyes can do it. And that's a game that I think we'll discuss at length on this show when we get closer to it. But as of right now, and it's very hard to make predictions, in the offseason. That's why when we're going to look at this in 6 months' time, I might be way wrong. But I just have a feeling Ohio State's going to pick up that win, and that means they're also going to pick up key wins at home against Oregon and Michigan, which those are tough teams, especially to play in the Big Ten Conference. But when you're playing in Ohio Stadium, if you've ever been into Ohio Stadium, you understand how daunting of an environment that is and how much the home field advantage really plays a factor. And not to throw any shade at Michigan, but you just don't feel that way. I think it's overrated, the Big House is. So that's just my feeling right now. We're going to go with Ohio State 11-1, number 2 in the Big Ten Conference, and also playing for that Big Ten title.
Sweet. I went Oregon at number 3. I'm sure you'll be in a similar spot. That's an 11-1 team. I have... if Indiana didn't exist, I would have Team of Destiny vibes with Oregon. And when I say Team of Destiny, I mean Indiana last year was a Team of Destiny where it just doesn't matter. They're going to win every game all the way through, really no matter what happens. At Iowa, at Penn State, right, throughout the playoff. I have Team of Destiny vibes with Oregon. After Big Ten Media Days, even more so, because I just loved everything Dan Lanning said. I loved everything Dante Moore said. I didn't speak to any of the other Oregon athletes. I don't know if anyone else that we know was at any of those press conferences, but I know that I love what's happening at Oregon. I love the roster. I love the quarterback. I love the coach. I have Team of Destiny vibes with that team, and I almost went 12-0 with them. But if I went 12-0 with them, that would put Ohio State at 9-3, which really made me uncomfortable. So I picked Ohio State at home, and if I use the home team logic, obviously that wasn't the only factor, but if I use the home team logic to pick Texas over Ohio State, I'd have to use the home team logic to pick Ohio State over Oregon, just considering how close those teams are. So Oregon's 11-1 for me. That means they missed the Big Ten championship game. But we'll see how that plays out a little bit later on as we roll through our playoff predictions. But Oregon 11-1 with a loss to Ohio State.
Same. I have Oregon 11-1, loss to Ohio State. And I mean, I also debated on Oregon beating Ohio State as well. Where it's definitely possible. We saw Oregon go into Ohio Stadium and beat Ohio State in the regular season. We also saw Ohio State travel out to Eugene a couple years ago and they lost to Oregon in Oregon's home building. So Oregon definitely can beat Ohio State. I don't think it's out of the question in the regular season, but I have Oregon going 11-1, and I think just a little bit of foreshadowing, they need a loss to get a little bit of the chip on their shoulder to carry a postseason run.
Sure, absolutely, and that's certainly the again the coach and the quarterback and the roster that could potentially put together a postseason run. We'll talk about that a little bit later on as well. My number 4, interestingly, is Illinois at 10-2. Now, this isn't necessarily right; like this isn't a power ranking, but Illinois kind of avoids some disaster scenarios with the schedule. They have a lot of great games at home, and I have them losing to Ohio State and Oregon. Both, I think, are acceptable decisions. Illinois is 10-2 at number 4 for me. That's higher than I expected when I started.
Yeah, I at number 4 I have Penn State. Um, Penn State to me is a team that can sneak into the college football playoff. Their schedule is just it's easier than most Big Ten teams. They avoid the top 3 that we just mentioned, and I think those top 3 teams in the Big Ten Conference, it's pretty consensus. You're going to look at Indiana, Ohio State, and Oregon as they have most likely the best, or not most likely, they do have the best coaches. They have the best rosters, and they're the best teams in the Big Ten. And when you go down from that top 3, it starts to get a little bit dicey because a lot of these teams can beat each other up in the middle of the Big Ten Conference. But Penn State, it's essentially half of Iowa State combined with half of Penn State from last year. And you had a couple guys leave and go to Virginia Tech with James Franklin, but Penn State, they get Rocco Becht. Most starts in college football this year, or all time, just for this year, not all time. But Penn State, 10-2, their losses at home against USC and at Michigan. But I do think a 10-2 Big Ten team is enough to sneak into the college football playoff, even if Penn State might not be that good. You remember there's been discussions throughout the past couple of years with an expanded playoff is, can a 2-loss team get in? They have before, and does it matter their strength of schedule? And until the College Football Playoff Committee comes out and says, we are going to take in account the strength of schedule, we're going to do X, Y, Z, and have these actual rules in place, I think Penn State can take advantage of being a 10-2 Big Ten team and potentially sneaking into the college football playoff. So they have a great team. They have a familiar backfield at running back, bringing over Iowa State transfers. They have James Peoples coming in from Ohio State. I like Penn State here. They avoid the top 3. They're my number 4.
This is why you should subscribe to Garrison's Gradient on Substack so that we get these this rankings algorithm going, because strength of schedule matters the most in that rankings algorithm, and conference affiliation is completely unrelated. And I think that's important because of how there's 18 teams. Because we're going to list the next team I'm actually going to list. This is a good segue. Plays Indiana, Oregon, Ohio State. Penn State plays none of them. Those 2 teams aren't playing in the same conference, really, if we're having a real conversation. So when you check out those rankings algorithm outputs a little bit later on in the calendar year, then you'll see some interesting stuff with that. And we'll see how much the strength of schedule inhibits Penn State in that regard. My next team, number 5, is Michigan. I'll just say real quick, I have a 4-way tie of 9-3 teams. I only say this because Penn State, with the tiebreakers, is in last out of this group. Michigan, USC, Iowa, Penn State. I'll just stick with Michigan and talk about them for the moment. 9-3, they play Indiana, Oregon, and Ohio State. That's really rough. That's really unfortunate. They obviously have Ohio State on the road. They'll host Indiana. Again, we don't know what Michigan is. I don't even know if I'd really call that obviously it's a trap game, Indiana at Michigan for Indiana, but I don't know what we could make of that. I don't know what to consider that with Michigan right now, but it's impossible for me to put Michigan in the college football playoff over any of those 3 teams, just because Indiana doesn't have a returning quarterback, but you've got the reigning national champions and then 2 returning quarterbacks and great rosters. Obviously, great coaches all around. Kyle Whittingham's probably awesome. Bryce Underwood's probably awesome. We just don't know it yet. We haven't seen it yet. So Michigan's 9-3 for me. They're at number 5. And I'm curious to see what your 9-3 mess looks like, because I know I certainly have a ton of ties.
Number 5 for me in the Big Ten is USC. They bring in the number 1 overall recruiting class from high school coming in this year. From what I'm hearing from their fall camp, 5-star edge Luke Waffle, he has been incredible, and I followed his recruitment a ton. So USC also getting, a new defensive coordinator in Gary Patterson. I think that'll help them a lot. Lincoln Riley, he's an offensive-minded guy. And USC, they also have to play the top 3 in the Big Ten Conference. Those are their 3 losses. But USC could make an argument if they were to beat one of those two or one of those three teams. They could make an argument to be in the college football playoff, and they return the starting quarterback, Jaden Maeva. I think it's a very, very good offense. And defense, there's a lot of questions, but Gary Patterson, he was the TCU coach for a long time. He's been around college football programs. He was associated with Texas a couple of years ago, but now back in the defensive coordinator role for USC. I think USC goes 9-3, and if they are to win one of those three games against Indiana, Ohio State, or Oregon, they're a college football playoff team for sure.
Absolutely, yeah. You make a great point because I don't think I realized just how much of a clean result that could be. If they just win one of those and are 10-2, that might be all it takes. The argument for USC as well is that they host Oregon and Ohio State. So even if you sacrifice the Indiana matchup, obviously some upset potential there. Again, I have Team of Destiny vibes with Oregon, and I can't bring myself to give Ohio State a third loss against specifically the teams that they're facing. If they had Oregon on the road, it'd be a different story. But obviously, Ohio State's fortunate to not have that tough of a schedule. USC's at 6 for me. They're in that same spot. I'll go ahead because you hit a lot of the points there. I'll go ahead and say my number 7, and that's Iowa, who also 9-3, losses to Michigan, Ohio State, and Illinois. Feels like a perpetual 8 to 10 win team. We'll see if they can launch to anything beyond that, but this is where I'm at. There's this whole tier in the Big Ten of teams that I just would never pick to beat Indiana, Ohio State, or Oregon. At least I could never bring myself to do it. And they'll split games against each other and have weird situations there, and some schedules are more favorable than others. Iowa loses to Michigan, Ohio State, and Illinois. They're 9-3 and in 7th place for me.
I also have Iowa. I see them 9-3, losses to Michigan, Ohio State, and Minnesota. So those are the 3 losses for Iowa. And Kirk Ferentz always does a great job. They're always right there. So I have Iowa. I have a lot of confidence Iowa's going to be an 8 or 9 win football team almost every single year. And 2026 is no different.
Could get to 10 wins and make the college football playoff, though. Maybe not with this schedule necessarily, but just like USC, it's that tier that could potentially, launch a 4th team up there. We'll see how that happens, or if that happens in the next couple of years. Penn State's my number 8. You already talked about them. Losses to USC, Michigan, Washington. So you had them going on the road and winning against Washington, if I'm not mistaken. Which, maybe I'm just a Penn State doubter, verifiably, because I have them losing across the country against Washington, but also have them losing at home when USC goes across the country and beats Penn State. I struggle with first-year head coach teams. I mean, I'm in the same situation with Michigan at 9-3. That one's a little bit more justifiable because of the schedule stuff. But these losses, when I look at them, USC is strong and probably definitely will be strong, but goes across the country to Penn State. So you have a real argument with Penn State winning that one. There's the worst case scenario Michigan that could exist this season where it doesn't click in year one. Bryce Underwood still needs another year. Kyle Whittingham needs one more year. That could really happen, and we could really be having Michigan at 7 or 8 wins, which completely upends really our whole rankings, in part because Penn State's 10-2 all of a sudden, and they may not have those quality wins, but they're 10-2. And then the Washington Road one, the Washington Road one, even, you have an argument there because of the Damon Williams stuff, and you could say that there's still some lingering effects of that whole fiasco. So there's a 12-0 Penn State argument. That's not completely out of the realm of possibility, but definitely there's an 11-1 argument. I just have them at 9-3. I struggle with new head coaches. I'm going to have the same problem with Lane Kiffin. I'm considering, I haven't brought this up to you yet, but I'm considering doing this with the SEC sometime in the next couple weeks, and I'll have the same problem with Lane Kiffin. I will just preview now. LSU is not my playoff, and it's partially because I don't like to predict teams with first-year head coaches to do well, no matter how great the head coaches are. Obviously, Matt Campbell and Lane Kiffin fit that category. Penn State's at 8 for me. That's my 9-3 teams, and I have no one at 8-4. I don't know about you, though.
I have a couple teams at 8-4. Rounding out the 9-3 teams, Illinois. I think Illinois, Brett Bielema. I mean, they were right there with Luke Altmaier. Now it's going to be a brand new, fresh faces in that Illinois locker room. But I think the program is right there. They're knocking on the door of potentially becoming a 10-win football team. We saw the momentum that they had winning the bowl game last year against Tennessee. And I think Illinois can kind of carry that momentum into this season. And I have their 3 losses being Ohio State, Oregon, and Iowa. And those are 3 teams that I think we've already talked about, but very good football teams. And it's tough to win in the Big Ten and do that week in, week out. Just as everybody says it's tough to do it in the SEC and be good week in and week out. Illinois will drop 3 games, but I still haven't talked about my 8-4 teams because I'll lead this one. My number 9 team is Michigan. I think Michigan goes 8-4, and I think Michigan loses 3 games in conference. But I think they lose to Oklahoma. They lost to Oklahoma last year, but it's another healthy John Mateer. And if Mateer can go into the Big House, and whatever game that is, I assume it will be a noon game. But if Mateer can go in at noon, I don't think the Big House is as daunting as college football fans make it seem. While it does hold the most amount of people, I just don't think it's the home field advantage that plays really into Michigan's hands as much as people think it does. Michigan, new head coach, Kyle Whittingham, he's a proven winner. But what Whittingham hasn't done is coach a program like Michigan, and I'm super excited to see what he does. I think Michigan loses to the big 3 in the Big Ten. So loses on the road at Oregon. They're going to lose at home to Indiana. And they're going to lose on the road at Ohio State. And I think also a lot of stuff came out of Big Ten Media Days. Kyle Whittingham, when asked about the game, the best rivalry, in my opinion, in all of college sports, potentially in all of sports, he says, he doesn't hate Ohio State. In my opinion, he got that question way wrong. If you want to be a coach in a rivalry like Ohio State-Michigan, you have to hate the other team. And I don't care if he's just some super nice guy, whatever. You have to have that edge to it. I think you look at the past couple days when Julian Sains asked about Michigan, when Jeremiah Smith asked about Michigan, they hate Michigan. Bryce Underwood asked about it. It's just another game for him. So I think those are 2 completely different mindsets, and I think that's why Michigan is going to lose the big games on their schedule this year. 8-4, that's the start of the Kyle Whittingham era, and I'm not a believer. I do believe in running back Savion Hyder. I think he is going to be an absolute beast. I think he can help Michigan win any of these big-time games, but is he enough to make up for Bryce Underwood's lack of... I didn't see anything in year 1 that made me think that he can step up and beat these big-time teams. We saw what happened last year in the game, and it was not pretty. So unless he had the best offseason of his life, Michigan goes 8-4.
All right, let's see it. That's probably the boldest prediction so far in the episode. That'll be interesting to see play out. Are you on the record as saying that Michigan fans aren't loud? I'm asking the question.
I just don't think that stadium it doesn't rock your brain. The loudest stadium I have ever been in was, without a doubt, and granted it did have a roof, and I think that does a lot, but it was Indiana-Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game. I've been to 3 different Ohio State-Michigan games, 1 in the Horseshoe, 2 at the Big House, and without a doubt, the one in Ohio Stadium was significantly louder. It does... we'll see. We're going for Indiana, Michigan. You will see. It's such a big stadium that I feel like the thing that swirls more is the wind. Like, it gets cold. It will whip you right in the face, but not the noise.
All right, so on the record is saying that the Big House doesn't rock your brain. That's a little bit less of a hot take than just saying Michigan fans aren't loud. I was hoping I could I was trying to probe you right there, see if we could get any major quote. Get a quote graphic out of this one.
Michigan has great fans. I just don't think the Big House it's not a scary stadium in my opinion.
All right, not a scary stadium. That's part of the reason why Michigan is 8-4, and just think about what that does to Penn State. Think about the doors that potentially opens if it hits her. I mean, yeah, I honestly, Penn State wasn't really on my playoff radar until I looked at their schedule, and now they're on the playoff radar. So I'll be interested to see that team's season play out over the course of the season. I don't know when the first time I'll watch them with full attention will be, because obviously they have some easier non-conference games early. I'll have them on the TV, but maybe on the third or fourth screen, just because of how awesome college football Saturdays are, as we all know. Do you have any more 8-4 teams? I think you should run through the rest of those before we hit the 7-5 block.
I have Minnesota going 8-4.
Sweet.
And my mind was kind of changed because we did something very similar to this in the tier lists, and I had Minnesota on my last tier, but I do, after reading the article, Garrison's Gradient, I do also, after hearing PJ Fleck talk, I have a lot of confidence in what they're building at Minnesota, and I think their losses are against good teams in Michigan, Indiana, Penn State, and Washington. So those are their 4 losses, and I mean, they make sense. Those teams are most likely on paper better than Minnesota, but I do see Minnesota exceeding expectations this year, and obviously winning the rivalry game at the end of the year against Wisconsin, which I think is more important for a lot of these Minnesota fans. You always want to win the rivalry game, but Minnesota exceeds expectations, and they become an 8-4 team.
Sweet. Minnesota, the word Minnesota within the context of everything I know about Minnesota looks like 8-4. They're 7-5 for me. They're in that 7-5 block. I think from here, I'll briefly touch on some losses if I think they're notable, but 7-5 and down, I think I'll just run through the records real quick. I have Washington at 9 at 7-5, Nebraska at 10 at 7-5, Minnesota at 11 at 7-5, UCLA at 12 at 7-5, 13 is Wisconsin at 6-6. 14 is Michigan State at 4-8. 15 is Northwestern at 4-8. 16 is Purdue at 3-9. 17 is Maryland at 3-9. And 18 is Rutgers at 2-10. Did you hear anything there that made you jump and say that's outrageous?
No, I did this definitely. I wish I probably took into account more of these middle of the pack Big Ten teams just beating each other up and taking wins from one another. I'll just run through my 7-5 and down. I have at 10 Washington at 7-5, 11 UCLA at 7-5. I think Bob Chesney will do. I think they're going to exceed expectations in year one. I really do like what Chesney is going to build in Westwood. So they're at 7-5. Nebraska at 6-6. I don't know. It's just a gut thing with them. Michigan State at 5-7. Wisconsin at 4-8. I think this is Luke Fickell's last year. In Madison, Northwestern, I have them at 15-4-8. Rutgers at 16-4-8. Purdue at 17-2-10. And then Maryland is also another 2-10 squad. I don't think either of those teams are very good, Maryland and Purdue, and it was tough to make their schedule for sure.
Purdue beats Wake Forest, and it's the highlight of the season. That's my take on Purdue.
I had Wake Forest beating Purdue, so that was where I tried to maybe justify it, but I don't know, something about it. Purdue's not winning that game, and that's why they're a 2-10 squad.
It's a home game, and you know how I love home teams. It's not going to happen in the Big Ten, and it's not going to happen against Notre Dame. Purdue could win Big Ten games, but it'd be against those other teams at the bottom that aren't particularly impressive. It's going to happen against Wake Forest. That's the highlight of the season for Purdue. I grew up in a Purdue household, so I'm kind of a Purdue guy a little bit, even though I, obviously cover.
We can tell from your wall.
Can you really? Do I have Purdue stuff on my wall?
No.
Okay. No, because I had Purdue stuff on in my background, my podcast background in my hometown. And the one, you can walk into my room right now, and there's, I have a bigger bed now. So there's a bed there, there's empty shelves, and there's just like a little Purdue teddy bear on one of them. And that's all that's there. I should go take a picture next time I'm home. It didn't make the trip because of that worry. And also I now live with roommates who are obviously IU guys. Just, got to avoid some hard conversations there. But Purdue beats Wake Forest. So The bias doesn't matter. The Purdue background bias doesn't matter because they're going to go 3-9 anyway. So I can show off some
Doesn't
bias
matter. Sorry,
exclusively in
Barry.
this situation.
Sorry, Barry Odom. It's not going to matter.
I really liked him at Big Ten Media Days. I really enjoyed that conversation. I asked him a question, and it wasn't like a compelling question. I was mostly just asking to ask, but I don't know. I enjoyed him. I was happy with him. I've decided I like him. So I hopefully that translates to a win against Wake Forest. That's my prediction. Week 3 or whenever that game is, that's going to be a big day for the ABCFB podcast when Purdue beats Wake Forest. But those are our picks. So are we both at the same Big Ten championship game? It's Indiana, Ohio State. I picked Indiana. I only say that first because it's no surprise, undefeated. I can't pick them to lose a game. What about you?
I'm picking. I did not actually predict this, so this might throw off my rankings, but I am going to go. I'm going to go with Ohio State. I think it's difficult to beat a team twice. I think Ohio State wins in the Big Ten championship game. Unfortunately, did not take this into account when making these rankings that we're going to do with the college football playoff. So I still have Indiana at number 1. Still could definitely happen. So we're going to stick with that. But I think it's going to be difficult for Indiana to beat Ohio State twice, especially considering how close last year's game was and how close I anticipate the regular season matchup being. But let's run through our 1 through 18 from the bottom to the top. Number 1, Indiana 12-0. Number 2, Ohio State 11-1. Number 3, Oregon 11-1. Number 4, Penn State at 10-2. Number 5, USC at 9-3. Number 6, Iowa at 9-3. Number 7, Illinois at 9-3. Number 8, Michigan 8-4. 9, Minnesota 8-4. 10, Washington 7-5, 11, UCLA 7-5, 12, Nebraska 6-6, 13, Michigan State 5-7, 14, Wisconsin 4-8, 15, Northwestern 4-8, 16, Rutgers 4-8, and then 17, Purdue at 2-10, and 18, sorry about it, Maryland, sorry about it, Mike Loxley, 2-10, so that's the full 18 for me in the Big Ten this year.
Sweet. I went Indiana, Ohio State, Oregon, Illinois, Michigan, USC, Iowa, Penn State, Washington, Nebraska, Minnesota, UCLA, Wisconsin, Michigan State, Northwestern, Purdue, Maryland, Rutgers at the very bottom. Maybe I'm underrating Rutgers. I really liked the suit that Loxley was wearing at Big Ten Media Days, by the way. I think he wins the suit. Battle with all the coaches.
It was cool. Good win for Maryland, though. Good win for Maryland. At least they're going to get the suit award. But, yeah, I don't have a ton of faith, in Maryland as a team this year. And they might win more than 2 games, and I hope they do.
That's how I feel about Rutgers.
It's just difficult for them. And Rutgers with Greg Schiano, I do enjoy watching some Greg Schiano coached football at Rutgers. But, I don't think those teams will have enough to become bowl eligible. And once you get below 6 wins, you're not bowl eligible. So that's where you have to kind of put that distinction there. And none of those teams in the bottom, 4, 5, 6 in the Big Ten stand out to me. And they can all kind of run together. If they beat each other up, that's awesome. If they find a way to become a 6-win team, that's awesome. I just don't see it right now in the preseason.
Time will tell. All right, let's move on to our college football playoff predictions. Let's start with our seeding. Let's reveal this. We'll alternate. So let's go by 4. I'll start with my teams that I have with the first round bye. Obviously, undefeated Big Ten champions Indiana are number 1. Notre Dame is 2 for me. Georgia is 3, and then Miami. Now, I don't know if it's really realistically possible in my predictions for Notre Dame to be between Indiana and Georgia. Because if Georgia wins the SEC, they're probably undefeated. That schedule is alarmingly easy for SEC standards with Georgia when you just look at who they have at home. They go to Alabama. I'm an Alabama doubter, so that is an easier one for me. I guess if you're not an Alabama doubter, that's a a little bit more tricky. But if Georgia has a first-round bye, they probably won the SEC, and if they won the SEC, they probably were just undefeated on the way. So maybe that means that they leap Notre Dame. But I have Notre Dame at 2, partially because I know that the SEC is definitely more scary than Notre Dame's schedule in terms of potential upsets. So that's why I put Georgia at 3, just in case, to kind of hedge my bet on that. And then Miami is at 4 as that ACC champion. I imagine that your first-round bye is a little bit different. I'd love to hear them.
Yeah, I'm changing it right now just to make sure that I have accounted for the Big Ten championship. So at number 1, I think Notre Dame goes undefeated this year. Number 2, Indiana. Number 3, Georgia. Number 4, Ohio State. So those are my top 4. I think I'm pretty confident in those top 4, and it doesn't matter any of those Big Ten teams if they have one loss. If it's Indiana, Ohio State, Oregon, they have a great argument to be in the top 4, and I just think I really value those top 3 teams in the Big Ten being Indiana, Ohio State, and Oregon.
Sweet. Now our home teams in the first round, number 5 for me is Texas. Number 6 is Oregon. Number 7 is Big 12 champion BYU. And then number 8 is Ohio State. And this is the biggest disparity between our predictions. I have Ohio State losing the Big Ten championship game and also losing to Texas. So really having 3 losses at this point, but only 2 of them count. The regular season loss to Indiana and the one to Texas as well. Whereas you are, I think, in a spot where you have Ohio State as a 1-loss conference champion. So obviously, launched much higher. So that's the biggest difference, which I think is fascinating. But those are my home teams. What are your home teams, 5 through 8?
5 through 8. Oregon at 5, Miami at 6, Texas at 7, and number 8, Lane Kiffin in his first year. I know you're a doubter. Lane Kiffin and LSU.
I don't know if I'm a doubter. I think I'm just I'm not a risk taker. What do you call that? What do you call someone that doesn't take risks? I don't know. I'll have to think about it the next time you're speaking. But whatever that is, I think that's what I am. And that's why. Do I have no I think I have no first-year head coaches in the sport. It's really hard for me to pick a team that has a first-year head coach or a new quarterback or both over a team that has, which is why I have Team of Destiny vibes with Oregon, the Dante Moore and Dan Lanning, even BYU, returning coach, returning quarterback, even though the quarterback's young, kind of like in a Notre Dame situation. I like that a lot too. So you'll notice that that's what I like the most. The returning quarterbacks, returning coaches, and just enough returning production and enough faith. That's what I need to put a team in the playoff, really. And so that's my thing with BYU. Moving on for me into my road teams. Texas Tech is number 9. The schedule's just too easy. I really wanted to doubt Texas Tech. I had them off the list for a while. I just kind of couldn't help it. Same argument with Texas Tech. Not really, but kind of the same argument as, maybe the Washington stuff where you say, like, this whole Brendan Sorsby on a much higher scale, much greater scale, of course. Like, maybe this Brendan Sorsby fallout stuff just impacts the team too much. I just couldn't find losses on the schedule. I really couldn't. I don't think they play Utah or BYU. I know they don't play BYU in the regular season. And they have a lot of games that are at home that work out well. It's really hard to find losses for Texas Tech. So I have them as a 1-loss team with the loss not really counting. 12-1, lost to BYU in the Big 12 championship game. They're at 9. 10, I have Ole Miss. I can't keep Trinidad Chambliss out of the playoff. No matter what I do, it's going to be really hard for me until they lose the required amount of games to be effectively eliminated. It's going to be really hard for me to not have Ole Miss in here. Texas A&M is number 11. I did a season preview for that team on Garrison's Gradient, and I believe in them still. I think they're a perpetual 9, 10, 11 seed, lose in the first round type of team. Part of the point on that Garrison's Gradient story is the thought of maybe if they could launch to anywhere higher than that, but right now they haven't. And then number 12 for me is Boise State as that 5th, or I guess really just the group of 6 conference champion. They play Oregon early on the road, and that's, I think, their only loss for me on the season. But it's wild that you can do that. You can go at Oregon and then still make the playoff as a, potentially. I mean, I know it's the auto bid situation, so that's why. But I'm just, I'm interested to see if that hurts Boise State in any way moving forward, if they drop a game randomly throughout the season.
Well, remember they did. They played at Oregon the year they made the college football playoff with Ashton Genty, and they lost in a very close game. And that caught my eye because obviously Ashton Genty was incredible. I think he had over 200 yards rushing against Oregon, and they do it again this year. So I also have Boise State at that number 12 spot, winning that, group of 5, group of 6 spot. At number 9, I have Texas A&M. So welcome back, Mike Elko. Welcome back, Marcel Reed. You get another shot at the college football playoff. Obviously, what happened last year, losing in their own home building to Miami. Hopefully, for their sake, it leaves a sour taste in their mouth and want to win. I think they go on the road this year, though. Number 10, Texas Tech, staying in the state of Texas. That means both Texas, or all of Texas, Texas A&M, and Texas Tech in the college football playoff. I love Joey McGuire. Doesn't matter all the craziness around Brendan Sorsby. I think they have a schedule, they have a path, and they have the roster, talent across the board to make the college football playoff. At number 11, I don't go an SEC school. I think the Big Ten gets the last spot. Give me Penn State. And I talked about it. I tried to, give some foreshadowing in the earlier part, talking about the Big Ten schedule. I just think that Penn State has a favorable schedule. I think they have the right coaches in place. I love that they're bringing the offensive coordinator from Iowa State to Penn State. And then you get a great hire in Danton Lynn from USC to go back to his alma mater at Penn State and be the guy for that defense. I love Matt Campbell. I think this roster is good enough to sneak into the college football playoff. Are they the best team on that bubble? Probably not. I probably think Ole Miss beats Penn State, or maybe even Oklahoma beats Penn State. But does a 10-2 Big Ten team like Penn State get into the playoff? I think yes. So they are my number 11, obviously number 12. I already talked about that, but Boise State.
That could be the type of moment that just completely sparks playoff expansion. It happens right there. There's too much outrage. Kind of like, I mean, I know it's obviously not a direct cause of this, but the Florida State stuff with that undefeated Florida State team, that was one of those, like, just expanded. You got to get it. It has to happen, at least in terms of the mindset and the public perception. And so maybe that could be that, at least for, folks down south that Penn State sneaks in. This is why conference affiliation. I want everyone to get away from conference affiliation. Obviously, it matters. I don't care that Penn State's in the Big Ten at all. Like, I don't really care about Big Ten has this many teams, SEC has this many teams, because Penn State's schedule is completely different from Michigan's, for example, which is why the AGPB rankings are. I might find a better name for that rankings algorithm. That just used to be, but that was what I used to call it. That's why I feel like those are great. It's a computer. It has no feelings. It has no thoughts. It just has numbers, and therefore the Big Ten is meaningless, and so is the SEC. Anyway, let's move on to our first rounds. I'll go ahead and announce my first round games. First of all, I have Boise State at Texas, and to no one's surprise, I have Texas winning that one at home. I have Texas A&M at Oregon, and my team of destiny, Oregon, wins that one as well. Ole Miss at BYU. I take Ole Miss here. Quarterback matchup definitely leans Ole Miss in that situation. I love Trinidad Chambliss. I was happy to see him return because I was sad to see him lose. And I remember at the time last year, when Indiana was in and it was in a question of whether or not it was going to be Ole Miss or Miami in that other spot, I remember thinking that, if Indiana goes to Miami at Miami, that, maybe isn't a concern because the Indiana fans travel so well, but could be a concern. And then from a fan's perspective, and this is not the right fan's perspective because I've really never been a true IU fan, right? Grew up in a Purdue household, and now I cover the team neutrally. So I have that 1 year gap where I was a student, happened to be a national championship. That kind of fell in my favor a little bit. But I remember at the time thinking, if I was a lifelong IU fan, like a lot of the people around me, I would be okay with losing to Ole Miss out of anyone because that's obviously a great story. Lane Kiffin leaves. The team wins a championship anyway. Trinidad Chambliss is awesome. So I have Ole Miss over BYU, not just because I like them. Also, I think they would win that game. I think most people would agree with me there. And then Texas Tech at Ohio State. Couldn't bring myself to pick Texas Tech over Ohio State. I don't think I really ever could at this stage of the season. So Ohio State advances as well. Those are my first round picks and my first round winners and losers.
My first round, Oregon hosting Boise State again, and I think Oregon wins that matchup again. Miami hosting Penn State. Miami wins that one pretty soundly as well. Texas versus Texas Tech. I would love to see this matchup, just pure box office for college football, but Texas is the better team. I think Texas could go and win a national championship. I don't have them winning the national championship, just foreshadowing, but they have the talent in place Sarkisian. He has been a game away twice of playing for a national championship as the head coach at Texas. I think they would beat Texas Tech, especially in their own home building. And LSU hosting Texas A&M. Talk about another exciting matchup. This one would go to LSU, in my opinion. I believe in the coaching staff in Baton Rouge. I believe in Lane Kiffin. I believe in Sam Leavitt. I definitely believe in their offensive line, headlined by Jordan Seaton, the transfer from Colorado. And I think they have enough to win that game.
You got 2 rematches in your first round: Oregon, Boise State, and then LSU, Texas A&M. So you talk about it being hard to beat a team twice. What if Boise State beats Oregon round 1? I would never pick that personally, and maybe that's not exactly the category of hard to beat a team twice, because it's not just national championship contender on national championship contender. But that'd be fascinating nonetheless. I'd love LSU, Texas A&M as well. That'll be fun, and I think week 4 in the regular season. So that'll be interesting moving forward. Moving on to our quarterfinals. I'll have number 1 Indiana versus number 8 Ohio State. Maybe in this situation, the committee would try to avoid having that so early, because that's the Big Ten championship game in both of our opinions. Indiana over Ohio State in that situation. The true team of destiny, the team of destiny of all team of destinies in Indiana, continues to win. They're in the semifinals.
3 wins over Ohio State in Indiana's.
That is outrageous, and I didn't think about that. But the first one is at home. Yeah, that's a great point, because I grew up in a Purdue household, so also, therefore, grew up in a New Orleans Saints household. Drew Brees, one of those last couple playoff losses, was a team that beat Tom Brady and the Buccaneers twice and then lost in the playoffs. So I grew up on not being able to beat a team 3 times in a row. That is wild, and I would prefer it if they just didn't play each other. Maybe this is when you go back and look at the seeding, but what it comes down to is Ohio State losing to Texas. If Ohio State beats Texas, it's a completely different situation, and it's a 2-loss but really 1-loss team. Just basically BYU in the Big Ten, where they lose to Indiana twice and couldn't get any higher than that. And so then Ohio State is maybe a little bit higher, and we don't deal with this issue. But I guess I do have Indiana beating Ohio State 3 times, and you know what? I can't avoid it. I can't. There's nothing I can do about this. I said I wouldn't pick Indiana to lose in any situation moving forward. I still believe that. So I'm not even reconsidering this. You scared me for a second there. I was like, wait a second, I'm going against my principles, because I have my principles of returning coaches, returning quarterbacks. It's that algorithm in my brain. It's hard to pick. Like, for example, it'd be hard to pick LSU over Texas A&M for me, even if LSU was at home, just because of that little algorithm in my head. This goes against that. This goes against my you can't beat a team 3 times thought process. You make a great point and bring that up. But still, Indiana over Ohio State. Indiana, just flies past all of those algorithms, all of those precedents in my head. It's kind of a trump card there with Cignetti, the way I see it at this time. So Indiana's in the semifinal. Notre Dame versus Ole Miss made me think for a really hard time, for a really long time, especially because of the whole trope of, teams at the first round bye not winning besides Indiana. I still went Notre Dame, though, just because I think Notre Dame is a semifinal team, and it's hard for me to not put them in there, especially for a 10 seed. I put Oregon over Georgia, partially because the teams that have that warm-up game win frequently, and I think also I have Team of Destiny vibes with this Oregon team. Georgia, great. Maybe the SEC champion. I guess the SEC champion in these rankings, but not the national champion for sure, as Oregon knocks them off. Texas and Miami made me think for a while, too. Miami, I struggle to, again, I'm going against this with Indiana. Sometimes I struggle to put the team that made the national championship game and lost. I struggle to advance them too much further, especially if they run into someone as talented as Texas. So Texas is a semifinalist as well, setting up Indiana, Texas, and Notre Dame, Oregon. But let's do your quarterfinals first.
Notre Dame over LSU, for sure for me. I think Notre Dame might be the best team in the country. They come into the season pissed off. They come into the season with a chip on their shoulder, but also some of the best talent in the country. So Notre Dame over LSU. Then I have Indiana over Texas. I think this is just the classic Big Ten over the SEC, especially in the postseason. I think Indiana has that great offensive line, great defensive line. I think Indiana across the board can beat Texas, especially at a neutral site. Georgia versus Miami, and I have the team who played the week before, Miami, advancing. I think Miami is super talented, and talk about a chip on your shoulder, losing the national championship in your own home building. We have to see what this season holds for Miami. I think we could talk at length about Miami in a future episode. And then Ohio State, Oregon. We've seen this before. We saw it 2 years ago. Oregon was the better team all season. They were undefeated, and they ran into Ohio State at the wrong time. I think this could be the inverse. I think Ohio State could be the better team, but they run into Oregon at the wrong time. Oregon beats Ohio State, and talk about a team of destiny. I think Oregon has that mold. They've looked at the past 3 national champions, and Michigan, Ohio State, and Indiana, and they've seen what they've been able to do when you bring back your roster, when you retain those guys instead of sending them to the NFL draft. And Dante Moore could have been the 2nd overall pick this year in the NFL draft. And I think that's a common thought throughout the entirety of the sports world is Dante Moore decided to come back because he wants to win a national championship. Sour taste in his mouth across the board for Oregon, for Dan Lanning, for Dante Moore, for everybody associated with that program. They've never won a national championship before. And when they've been, put head-to-head against Big Ten teams in the college football playoff in the past 2 years, they've gotten steamrolled. I think Oregon has what it takes this year to win that game and advance to the semifinals.
All right, I'll do my final 4. I'll go through what I have left. Indiana versus Texas would be a whole lot of fun. I have Indiana winning that one as well, team of destiny. And then another team of destiny, Oregon over Notre Dame. I would love Oregon versus Notre Dame. And this is one of those almost exotic matchups that you just wouldn't expect to see. That's kind of what's great about the 12-team playoff. Miami, Texas is another one that I have around earlier that you just don't think about that being a possibility, partially because that was literally never a possibility in the 4-team playoff. I don't think either of those teams ever qualified for the 4-team playoff in its existence. So I love those great teams that are always awesome, but maybe aren't always, in that top 4, and therefore you don't even think about them playing each other in meaningful games in the postseason. And it's fun uniform matchups. Maybe I just like uniform matchups. Texas, Miami would be one of those. Notre Dame, Oregon would be another one. I just really struggle to pick anyone over Dan Lanning and Dante Moore. Maybe it's a trusting Dante Moore over CJ Carr thing. Obviously, the rosters are great. Obviously, Notre Dame's roster is awesome. I've got Oregon over Notre Dame here. And then I'll just say this because everyone knows where this is going. Indiana over Oregon. That would be a very, very sad way to go out for Dante Moore, definitely, to have it be Indiana twice, and kind of the thought that maybe you had the national championship team 1 year or maybe 2 years in a row. But there's just that team of destiny across you, and there's nothing you can do about it. Part of the beauty of the pain of sports. So I have Indiana over Oregon. That would be terrifying for Dante Moore. That'd be terrifying. Indiana over.
No, if Indiana goes 16-0 2 years in a row, 32-0.
I thought you said 2-0, and I was like, okay.
No,
Indiana over Oregon in the playoffs. Yeah, that'd be wild.
I definitely think it is possible. I think people need to get their head on straight and actually look at this Indiana roster. They can compete with anybody in the country. They can compete with anybody in the conference. And, they match up well against just about anybody, not even just from the winning the line of scrimmage battle. They are talented in every single position. So I have, for my semifinal, Notre Dame, Oregon. You already talked about this game. I would love to see Marcus Freeman coach against Dan Lanning, especially for a chance to play for a national championship game. And it's always difficult with these semifinals because you can't be too excited when you win one because you're already focusing on the national championship game. But I just would love to see the post-game reaction from both of those coaches. I have Oregon beating Notre Dame. Indiana, Miami, national championship rematch. Indiana's winning that game. And I would love to see that game as well because obviously both teams would want to beat each other again for a chance to play for another national championship. But that sets up an all Big Ten national championship game. And the MO for Oregon has been you play so well throughout the entire season, you face a Big Ten team in the playoffs, and you get steamrolled. Oregon has enough to win a national championship. Oregon's going to beat Indiana in the national championship game and win their first ever national championship. And that's my prediction. I loved what I heard from Dan Lanning and Dante Moore at Big Ten Media Days. I think it's a confident team. It's a talented group. And I think Oregon will beat Indiana I can't really even explain it. I think it's more just a go with your gut type of situation with Oregon. There's also the possibility they face a team like Ohio State a round earlier and just pee down their leg and lose it in a bad way. I mean, we've seen it 2 years in a row, so it's hard to actually predict Oregon will go and beat two Big Ten teams back to back and win a national championship game, or I guess within 3 games they would play two Big Ten teams. But I think Oregon has the talent and they have that chip on their shoulder to carry them across the line.
Absolutely. One thing I'm overlooking with Oregon is the big game problem possibility. I mean, I don't know if it's true, but it could be. And I think you maybe confirm that it's true if that happens again this season. You obviously have the Ohio State loss 2 years ago. You have the Indiana loss last year. Not really a big game in the playoff for Oregon up until that point. Obviously, every playoff game is a big game, but Texas Tech, not too much of an issue. And then obviously, what was it, James Madison, right?
Tech. Yeah, it was. I mean, they beat Texas Tech pretty handily. I mean, James Madison put up a good fight this past year, but it was at home in Autzen Stadium. They rarely lose in Autzen Stadium. That's why the Indiana win this past year was just so groundbreaking in college football, just because nobody expected Indiana to do it. And I think that opened a lot of people's eyes to what was actually happening in Bloomington and maybe gave them that faith to actually look at Indiana and be like, this team could win it all. They just beat Oregon in Autzen. So I think Oregon has the talent, but when you go and you lose the Rose Bowl the way they did 2 years ago, you lose the Peach Bowl the way they did last year. I mean, that's sickening for Oregon fans to have to sit through those games. It was over from the jump, both of them. I mean, obviously the D'Angelo Pons pick six, but Ohio State, I mean, Jeremiah Smith absolutely owned Oregon 2 years ago. When you play in these big games, it doesn't matter if you're 12-0 in the regular season like Oregon was 2 years ago, or have the regular season Oregon did this past year 11-1. It does not matter until you get into the postseason, and Oregon has proven for the past 2 years that they can't win the big game. This team is different, though. That's why I have them beating Indiana.
All right, that would be a whole lot of fun for me. I think there's a lot of potential national champions that would be a lot of fun. Notre Dame, an example, Oregon, example. Part of the reason why that semifinal is so great if it happens is because both those teams feel like they're right there, and they've been right there very recently, and definitely have felt like, for good reason, these last few years, that they've had teams that could go win a national championship, and they have to play each other. And like you said, someone has to lose. You've got Oregon over Indiana. I've got Indiana over Oregon. Our brackets panned out somewhat similarly, and that's a lot of fun. So we'll see what that looks like in 6 months when we go back and look at it. And I realize, and LSU goes 12-0 and wins the national championship. And I realize that not doubting, just being a little bit too safe around first-year head coaches is a bit of an issue. So we'll see how that plays out. Or maybe, I don't know, I'm trying to think of another just outrageous result from these brackets, at least from my bracket. I mean, for you, if Penn State goes like 5-7, that's it for you. That's what was I thinking on your side? Is Penn State having a bad year? And that was the
one bold call I made. It was Penn State sneaking in, but
it's a good.
It could happen. Call. It could happen.
Yeah, totally. Especially if Michigan's bad. Bryce Underwood could trigger playoff expansion by being bad. If I'm not predicting that, he could. If he's bad, then Penn State wins that game. They're 10-2. They go to the playoff, and 10-2 Oklahoma misses out. 10-2 LSU misses out, and then that probably wouldn't happen. It'd have to be like a 9-3 team. I don't know. We'd have to figure it out. We'd have to break down the numbers, I guess. This is why I made a rankings algorithm to do it for me. But yeah, SEC team doesn't make it, and then everyone riots, and we have a playoff expansion immediately, and it's all because Penn State had an easy schedule, maybe. I don't know. Who knows? We'll have to see how it plays out. But that's great. I'm glad we did that. We'll have to get talking about what we want our topics to be next time around. We definitely should hit on the SEC. Definitely should hit the SEC pretty hard before we move on into actual game season. But that's all I have to say. Anything else for you to add before we get out of here, Brooks?
No, I will say just really, really quick. I think the top three of the Big Ten, they are good enough to win the national championship. That's my prediction. I was really wrestling with the idea of Indiana winning another national championship or Ohio State winning the national championship. And those three teams, because obviously I have Oregon winning, all three of those teams, in my mind, they are the step above the rest. So the Big Ten owns the sport of college football. I don't think that's going to change this year. And yeah, I had trouble picking Oregon. But
I almost put all three of them in my semifinals.
That's not even crazy. That's not crazy.
It's maybe likely if they don't play each other. Ohio State, if Ohio State was against Notre Dame in my bracket, maybe if Ohio State was against Miami, I think it happens. I know that's probably the wrong example because of last year, but I think I'd predict that Ohio State over Miami. I don't know that I'd pick Ohio State over Notre Dame. I'd have to think about it a little bit more thoroughly. Ohio State over Georgia, maybe I'd pick. I don't know. Those are all rough examples.
What about this? Penn State, they do actually show up, and they're a one-loss team. And then Oregon and Ohio State potentially watching the Big Ten championship from the couch. What do you do when you rank those two teams if they're both one-loss teams?
Four teams in the playoff, right? You have to.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
Yeah, like the Big Ten has most likely 4 teams in this playoff because you struggle at that. I mean, you have the top 3 who, like, I'd put money on right now to make it. That 4th team, I see a realistic outcome where it's Penn State, it's USC, it's anybody just knocking on that door. Iowa. I mean,
yeah,
it's not out of the question for anybody. So I think the Big Ten, the middle of the conference, is a lot better than people give it credit for, just because of that argument, oh, the SEC is so deep, it's so stacked top to bottom. Big Ten has won the national championship 3 straight years. The Big Ten has talent just about anywhere, and I think NIL has helped close that gap for sure.
I have a greater drop-off after those top 3, just because I have Penn State at 9-3, because all those, you talk about the middle of the Big Ten beating each other up, that happens a little bit higher for me than it does for you, which I think is the difference, which maybe is going to, relieve the committee of a lot of conversations. One last thing, just because it's relevant to this conversation. I thought about this earlier and forgot to bring it up. It's more relevant to me and my predictions, but there's a real Ohio State misses the playoff wrinkle here too. If they lose to Texas, it's Texas, Indiana, Oregon. It's over, right? At 9-3, I think. I mean, maybe not. Obviously, we'd have to watch it play out.
That might be if Ohio State goes and loses those 3 games, then that means Ohio State might be the ones pushing for the playoff expansion. I mean, that's the other thing.
Yeah.
You say Michigan, if they just completely have a horrible year and Bryce Underwood is the guy who could potentially force this playoff expansion, it could be Ohio State. If they lose 3 games and they miss out on the college football playoff, I mean, I think there's a valid case to be like, Ohio State's too talented, but then you look at the wins and losses, and if they lose 3 games, and I mean, are we going to see the first ever 9-3 team in the college football plaff?
Yeah,
I don't know. It
the
puts
argument
a lot of pressure on the bubble.
Yeah, the argument is Texas and Indiana are on the road, and Oregon's a team of destiny, maybe. So if that plays out, that's what, because Oregon, Ohio State was one of those. Okay, Ohio State at home, it's 2 great teams, it's really close. Got to take the home team here. That was the situation for me, but I really almost thought about it. Also, some really tough road games too. Anyway, I think they go to Iowa. I mean, you know better than me, but the Ohio State schedule is outrageous.
Iowa, they go to USC. Ohio State has a tough schedule, but I mean, what do you say if their losses are to 3 teams all ranked in the top 6? I mean,
yeah, it's impossible.
That's difficult.
What do you do? Yeah, that's what I don't know. I mean, again, AGPB rankings, they'd probably be in because their losses would be to, as you mentioned, like maybe the top 3 seeds even. That could be a real conversation at that point. 1, 2, and 3, Indiana, Texas, and Oregon. We'll have to see how it plays out. Plenty to think about, plenty to discuss. That's all we have for you on this episode of the ABCFB podcast. A little bit earlier in the week this week than last week. Had an episode on Sunday. We'll have an episode on Thursday. Stay tuned for the episode next week. Indiana Fall Camp continues. We'll both be there. We'll have a great time. Monday, Wednesday, Friday next week, we'll enjoy, just writing and podcasting and doing all of those things. Obviously, this show as well. And week 0 is creeping ever closer. I think I said this in the last episode, but in my calendar, I wrote down August 22nd as the day for week 0, and I was wrong. It's August 29th, and that was just a misconception for me for like 5 months, and I've had to come to terms with that just a few days ago. So we pushed it back another week. It's August 29th, but we'll certainly be watching every game, have every game on the TV. When we get to that point, we'll have plenty to discuss on the ABCFB podcast shortly afterward as well. plenty of off-season topics until that point. Thank you so much for watching. We'll talk to you again next time.